I'm going to start by removing the handle assembly. That'll allow easier access to removing the piston and cylinder when I get to that point. Next, I'm going to remove the air filter housing. There's 2 screws on top, and then on the bottom side there's 2 screws that go all the way through to the carburetor. Next, I'm going to remove the fuel lines and the throttle cable. Next, I'm going to loose the clamp screw that's holding on the rubber boot. There are 4 bolts that hold the engine cylinder into place. I'm going to go ahead and loosen all those so I can pull the top end off. After I pull the cylinder off, I'm going to inspect the piston. This particular piston had scoring all the way around, which leads me to believe that there was a contaminant issue, not only a lean run issue, which caused the scoring on the piston. Now I'm going to remove the retainer ring so I can take the piston off the machine. Once the retainer rings are removed, we're going to go ahead and push through the piston pin. Before I remove the piston, I always pack paper towels in the case, that way debris doesn't fall inside the case when I'm working on the saw. The arrow always points to the exhaust side when doing an installation. I use press fluid to lubricate the piston while I'm installing the snap rings. The snap rings from Husqvarna are nice to install because they do have that little tail on there that you can grab with needle nose pliers. To install the snap ring, go ahead and put that open end into the groove where the piston is, and then rotate it clockwise while you're holding on to the tailed end. And eventually it'll snap into place. I use multi-lube grease to lube up the needle cage before I install it into the crankshaft. Center the piston onto the crankshaft and go ahead and push through the piston pin. Make sure you push the piston pin all the way to the other side where the retainer ring is, so that way you have enough room to work on putting the other retainer ring on the opposite side. Always double check to make sure that your snap rings are installed all the way into the seated area before you move on to the next step. If the snap rings come off during the operation of your saw, you're going to destroy everything that you just did within a second. Before you install the cylinder, make sure that you put your gasket into place. There's going to be 2 small holes on this gasket, and they are going to face the carb side of the saw. Before I install the cylinder, I'm going to lubricate the base of the cylinder as well as the top of the piston rings. There's 2 points where the piston rings fit around the piston, so make sure that you're lining those rings on each side of that pin. Otherwise, when you go to compress it, you'll end up busting the rings. I use one of these plastic ring clamps to secure the rings so that way I can install the top of the cylinder over the piston. Once the rings are aligned, go ahead and compress it down. This process takes a little bit of getting used to, just be patient with it. So what you're going to do is put the cylinder over top of the compressed rings, and you're slowly going to let gravity pull it down, give it a little bit of a push while you're releasing the pressure on the rings to let that bypass your ring clamp. I'm also going to show you another method using a wooden piston block. This will help hold up your piston so it doesn't drop into the crankcase. Once you get your cylinder past the rings, go ahead and remove the ring compression tool. With the block out of the way, go ahead and push the cylinder down until it meets the crankcase. Now I'm going to install the cylinder bolts. Notice there's 2 different sizes here. You're going to use the 2 shorter ones on the muffler side, and you're going to use the 2 longer ones on the carburetor side. Make sure that your gasket is aligned with the crankcase holes so that way you do not puncture it and damage it. I always get these started by hand so that way I'm not stripping anything out. Now I'm going to reattach the rubber boot and make sure that you guys are putting that clamp on there with the screw so it's easy to access so you can tighten it down. If you attach the boot before you have your cylinder down, it's a lot easier to access the screw, so it's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of headaches just doing it this way. Now I'm going to install the muffler, go ahead and put the studs in, then the heat shield, the gasket, and finally the muffler. The two longer bolts are going to go into the muffler and the two shorter ones are going to go into the crankcase. Now I'm going to reinstall the carburetor, the throttle cable, the fuel lines, and the air filter housing. I'm going to install a new spark plug and I'm going to reinstall the decomp valve on the side. All right, I got the top end replaced on the 395 XP saw. It only took me about 20 minutes to do the top end. I did spend quite a bit of time cleaning it up beforehand and afterwards. You really want to make sure that everything is clean so that way when you're exposing the crankcase that you're not getting a bunch of debris down in there. So I thoroughly clean everything before I take that cylinder off the saw. So if you guys found this video helpful, make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to my channel. I'm always updating new content with repairs of everything that comes through the shop on a daily basis.